Have you ever truly considered why Christmas exists at all? Or why it captivates us with such obsessive rituals every December, when the world outside is gray, cold, and silent, when humans themselves are at their most fragile, their minds quietly yearning for comfort, for meaning, for a sense of order against the creeping fear of darkness and death? Imagine a world without twinkling lights, without carols, without jolly men in red, where the longest night of the year is not celebrated but feared, when people huddled together, trembling, whispering prayers to unseen forces, offering gifts to gods and spirits they barely understood, hoping to negotiate with fate itself to spare them hunger, illness, or sudden death. The modern Christmas, the decorated tree, the stockings, the sugar-laden feasts, the laughter of children, is built atop layers of history so strange, so unsettling, that if you peel back the familiar, you uncover a festival that was never purely innocent, a festival intertwined with fear, obsession, and ancient superstition. In the ancient North, where winter descends like a living thing and daylight can vanish for weeks, people once believed that the natural world itself could turn against them, that trees, snow, and the wind were alive with spirits capable of harming those who failed to appease them. And so every ritual, every token, every song carried purpose far beyond decoration. The evergreen tree, now a symbol of cheer, was once a defiant reminder that life persisted even as decay surrounded it, a sacred object in rituals intended to guarantee survival. The holly, with its sharp leaves, was not just festive, but protective, warding off malevolent spirits. Candles, carefully placed, were not merely for warmth or ambiance, but acts of invocation, small beacons in the darkness meant to attract benevolent forces and repel the unseen watchers who haunted the long nights. And the gifts, why do we exchange them? Beyond the modern story of Santa's generosity lies a far older psychological pattern. Gifts were once bribes, offerings to gods, ancestors, and spirits, a desperate attempt to negotiate with forces invisible and capricious. Fail to offer the right tribute, and calamity might strike: an illness, a failed harvest, or worse, the unexplained death of a child. There is an unease hidden beneath the sugary exterior, a tension your ancestors knew well, that humanity has quietly inherited. Even the dates themselves are not as innocent as we imagine. December 25th, chosen to coincide with the Roman Saturnalia and the celebration of Sol Invictus, is a compromise, a human attempt to merge competing rituals, to harness ancient energies in the dead of winter, to create a sense of continuity and safety when the natural world felt most threatening. Consider Saint Nicholas, the man who inspired Santa Claus, whose generosity in life was legendary, yes, but whose folklore evolved alongside frightening tales of punishment, of those who failed to behave or to honor the old ways, being visited with retribution, a chilling reminder that reward and fear were inseparable in the human psyche. Carols and songs, too, were far from innocent. Originally, they were chants, often sung to summon protection, to negotiate with spirits, to enter homes and claim safety for those who performed them correctly. Sing poorly or skip a verse, and the consequences, in older times, could be severe. Even the modern traditions we embrace, the tree, the feasts, the lights, the songs, are layered with centuries of psychological conditioning, designed to reinforce safety, social cohesion, and a fragile illusion of control in a world dominated by death, disease, and darkness. The more you examine these layers, the more the cheerful image of Christmas begins to crumble, revealing a festival built upon fear, survival, and human obsession with controlling forces we cannot see or understand. And yet, this darkness is subtle, soft, almost imperceptible. It hides beneath the laughter, the glitter, the music, and the scent of pine. It lingers in the corners of rooms, in the flickering candlelight, in the silent pause of a carol sung just before dawn, when the world outside is frozen and still. The human mind, especially in winter, is drawn to ritual. It seeks meaning in repetition, comfort in tradition. Christmas, then, is not merely a holiday. It is a carefully structured exercise in human psychology, a time when millions participate in acts that are simultaneously joyous and ancient, simple and terrifying, familiar yet oddly foreign. The longer the night, the deeper the shadows, the more potent the rituals, and the more humans crave certainty and warmth. Perhaps the most disturbing question is this: how much of what we call joy is actually survival instinct, passed down over centuries, translated now into songs, lights, and gifts, while the underlying tension, the primal fear that birthed these rituals, quietly persists in our subconscious? And if we begin to notice, if we start to peel back the layers, we confront a strange duality at the heart of Christmas: light and darkness, joy and fear, innocence and something ancient and unknowable. Somewhere in the tradition you celebrate so enthusiastically, there is a shadow of the unknown, a whisper of history that most refuse to acknowledge, a reminder that human beings have always needed both pleasure and terror to navigate the cold, the dark, and the uncertainty of life. And when you sit by the fire, sipping your cocoa, or hang ornaments on your tree, remember that every habit you take for granted was once a fragile promise to unseen forces, a ritual designed to ensure survival when death and misfortune were never far away. Christmas is not just a holiday, it is a carefully structured exercise in human psychology, a time when millions participate in acts that are simultaneously joyous and ancient, simple and terrifying, familiar yet oddly foreign. The longer the night, the deeper the shadows, the more potent the rituals, and the more humans crave certainty and warmth. Perhaps the most disturbing question is this: how much of what we call joy is actually survival instinct, passed down over centuries, translated now into songs, lights, and gifts, while the underlying tension, the primal fear that birthed these rituals, quietly persists in our subconscious? And if we begin to notice, if we start to peel back the layers, we confront a strange duality at the heart of Christmas: light and darkness, joy and fear, innocence and something ancient and unknowable. Somewhere in the tradition you celebrate so enthusiastically, there is a shadow of the unknown, a whisper of history that most refuse to acknowledge, a reminder that human beings have always needed both pleasure and terror to navigate the cold, the dark, and the uncertainty of life. And when you sit by the fire, sipping your cocoa, or hang ornaments on your tree, remember that every habit you take for granted was once a fragile promise to unseen forces, a ritual designed to ensure survival when death and misfortune were never far away. Christmas is not just a holiday, it is a carefully structured exercise in human psychology, a time when millions participate in acts that are simultaneously joyous and ancient, simple and terrifying, familiar yet oddly foreign. The longer the night, the deeper the shadows, the more potent the rituals, and the more humans crave certainty and warmth. Perhaps the most disturbing question is this: how much of what we call joy is actually survival instinct, passed down over centuries, translated now into songs, lights, and gifts, while the underlying tension, the primal fear that birthed these rituals, quietly persists in our subconscious? And if we begin to notice, if we start to peel back the layers, we confront a strange duality at the heart of Christmas: light and darkness, joy and fear, innocence and something ancient and unknowable. Somewhere in the tradition you celebrate so enthusiastically, there is a shadow of the unknown, a whisper of history that most refuse to acknowledge, a reminder that human beings have always needed both pleasure and terror to navigate the cold, the dark, and the uncertainty of life. And when you sit by the fire, sipping your cocoa, or hang ornaments on your tree, remember that every habit you take for granted was once a fragile promise to unseen forces, a ritual designed to ensure survival when death and misfortune were never far away. Christmas is not just a holiday, it is a carefully structured exercise in human psychology, a time when millions participate in acts that are simultaneously joyous and ancient, simple and terrifying, familiar yet oddly foreign. The longer the night, the deeper the shadows, the more potent the rituals, and the more humans crave certainty and warmth. Perhaps the most disturbing question is this: how much of what we call joy is actually survival instinct, passed down over centuries, translated now into songs, lights, and gifts, while the underlying tension, the primal fear that birthed these rituals, quietly persists in our subconscious? And if we begin to notice, if we start to peel back the layers, we confront a strange duality at the heart of Christmas: light and darkness, joy and fear, innocence and something ancient and unknowable. Somewhere in the tradition you celebrate so Christmas, as we celebrate it today, may appear cheerful and comforting. Yet, beneath the layers of tinsel, music, and brightly wrapped gifts lies a hidden world of rituals that are bizarre, unsettling, and at times deeply disturbing. Practices whose origins stretch back centuries and reveal a shadowy side of human culture that most of us never consider. Take, for example, the tradition of hanging stockings by the fireplace, which seems innocent enough, a quaint activity for children, but historically, this custom evolved from offerings left for spirits who roamed homes in the long, dark nights of winter. Small bribes intended to appease unseen forces, to keep them from bringing illness, bad luck, or worse, misfortune upon the household. And those who neglected these rites risked consequences that could be harsh or inexplicable, a reality that has been sanitized over time into harmless anticipation of candy and gifts. Similarly, the figure of Santa Claus, now a universally recognized symbol of generosity and joy, is the culmination of a disturbing evolution in folklore. Saint Nicholas, a real historical figure renowned for acts of charity, became entwined with darker mythical figures who enforced morality with fear, who would punish misbehaving children, blending kindness with menace. And in some European traditions, companions such as Krampus or Knecht Ruprecht were tasked with terrifying children as a reminder of the consequences of misbehavior, a psychological duality of reward and punishment that lingers even in the light-hearted modern mythology. Caroling, often imagined as simple festive singing, has its own shadowed past. Early European carols were performed in ways that invoked protection from spirits or sought blessings for the household, sometimes requiring precise gestures, chants, or offerings, and failure to perform these correctly could result in misfortune, illustrating that what we now perceive as music and merriment was once a form of spiritual negotiation, a subtle and dangerous dance with powers unseen. Even the holiday feast, a central aspect of modern Christmas, contains echoes of ancient rites. Sugar, nuts, and roasted meats were not merely indulgent treats, but symbolic offerings to spirits and gods, methods of securing favor, ensuring fertility, and demonstrating human cunning in manipulating fate during the harshest months of the year. In some regions, entire families would engage in elaborate preparation to avoid offending the supernatural, including strict adherence to rituals whose meaning has been lost to time. Consider the strange, macabre practice of wassailing, where groups would sing and drink to the health of orchards, houses, and livestock. And in some interpretations, this ritual included splashing cider on trees, hanging bread in trees, or even sacrificing animals, all meant to awaken protective spirits and ensure abundance. Acts that now seem quaint or comedic, but once carried real psychological weight, where failure could lead to devastating consequences in the community's perception. Mistletoe, now a symbol of romance, is steeped in similarly sinister origins. Sacred in Celtic and Norse traditions, it was thought to contain potent life force, and its use required careful observance of rules and ceremonies. Misstep or disrespect could invite disease, bad luck, or even death. And yet, today, it hangs innocently above doorways, a faint echo of rituals that were once deadly serious. In Germany, the tradition of the Christmas tree itself carried elements of danger and psychological complexity. Trees were adorned not only with symbols of fertility and abundance, but sometimes with items meant to trick spirits or contain magical properties, a careful blend of superstition and psychology intended to preserve safety. And even the simple act of lighting candles on a tree was a calculated risk, both a plea for protection and a challenge to the forces believed to lurk in darkness. And there are even stranger customs. In parts of Europe, the Feast of the Holy Innocents involved masquerades, pranks, or symbolic acts recalling ancient human fears of child mortality, echoing the biblical story, but blending with pre-Christian rites in ways that can feel grotesque or shocking to modern sensibilities. People would act out danger and chaos in ritualized form, rehearsing survival against forces they could not control. The dark origins of Yule logs, which we now see as cozy symbols of warmth and gathering, included elements meant to trap evil spirits, purify households, or even contain remnants of sacrifices made to ensure fertility or safety. The burning of these logs was a communal ritual charged with psychological weight, a tangible act to confront mortality and misfortune, with its flickering flames symbolizing the precarious balance between life and death. And while many of these customs have been transformed over centuries into something bright, cheerful, and safe, the shadows of their past remain encoded in our collective unconscious, surfacing as inexplicable anxieties, rituals we perform without understanding, and a subtle unease that lingers even in the warmth of modern homes. A reminder that what we call tradition is often a survival mechanism disguised as festivity. Modern Christmas may appear entirely sanitized, yet these rituals, transformed and softened, continue to manipulate behavior, create patterns of psychological reinforcement, and subtly connect us to fears and hopes that humans have carried for thousands of years, proving that even when we believe we have conquered superstition and darkness, we are still following scripts written in the cold, long nights of our ancestors. And so, as we hang ornaments, sing songs, feast, and exchange gifts, we unknowingly perform a tapestry of rituals that span continents, centuries, and belief systems, some joyous, some terrifying, all shaping the ways we think, act, and feel during this season, while the faint echoes of the past whisper just beneath the surface, reminding us that Christmas is not merely about happiness or generosity, but about negotiating with the unseen, asserting control over the uncontrollable, and dancing with a history that is far stranger, darker, and more complex than the cheerful image we are taught to embrace. And yet, despite centuries of transformation, these shadows persist, subtle but undeniable, lying in the corners of rooms, in the flickering candlelight, in the expectations and pressures of celebration, waiting for those willing to look beyond the glitter, to question why we continue certain customs, and to see that the holiday, for all its light and cheer, carries a deep, unsettling, and profoundly human legacy, a mixture of joy, fear, control, and the eternal negotiation with forces that have never been fully understood, a dark tapestry still alive beneath every bow, every light, every familiar song, whispering a truth we seldom hear but instinctively feel in the long, cold nights of winter. Christmas, though celebrated as a festival of warmth, generosity, and joy, carries psychological and cultural undercurrents that are as powerful as they are often unnoticed, shaping behavior, thought, and emotion in ways that stretch far beyond the twinkling lights and cheerful music. At its core, the holiday is a mass psychological ritual, a carefully structured social phenomenon that taps into deep human anxieties about mortality, scarcity, belonging, and moral order. And even in its modern form, these echoes of ancient survival instincts continue to influence the way we feel, act, and connect with one another during the season. Consider the overwhelming focus on gift-giving. What appears as an act of kindness is simultaneously an exercise in social negotiation, a subtle reinforcement of hierarchy, obligation, and reciprocity. Humans, wired to detect imbalance and inequity, experience stress and satisfaction in equal measure as they navigate the expectations of friends, family, and society, fulfilling roles that were once rooted in offering gifts to spirits or deities as a survival mechanism, yet now manifest in complex emotional transactions, leaving many feeling both exhilarated and anxious. The lights that adorn homes, streets, and trees are more than decorative. Psychologically, illumination in darkness provides comfort and signals safety, a primal instinct harnessed over centuries to assuage fears during the darkest nights of the year, to create an illusion of control over a chaotic, uncertain environment, a ritualized battle with the subconscious dread of mortality and winter's cold grip. Even the music of Christmas carries subtle cognitive and emotional effects. Familiar carols trigger memory, nostalgia, and communal bonding, reinforcing social cohesion and personal identity, yet they can also evoke loneliness, melancholy, or the anxiety of unmet expectations, particularly for those separated from family or burdened by loss, revealing that the holiday, far from universally joyful, is a powerful amplifier of human emotion, both positive and negative. In societies around the world, Christmas functions as a cultural anchor, a shared reference point that organizes social life, strengthens community identity, and maintains traditions. Yet this cohesion often masks underlying tensions. Economic disparity becomes more visible under the spotlight of gift-giving and consumption. Family conflicts surface amid forced gatherings, and societal pressure to celebrate correctly can provoke stress, guilt, and emotional exhaustion, demonstrating that the festival's psychological impact is complex, multi-layered, and rarely fully understood. There is also a deeper symbolic dimension. The rituals of Christmas, trees, feasts, gifts, and songs act as a collective rehearsal of life's uncertainties, allowing communities and individuals to symbolically confront chaos, mortality, and social instability in a controlled environment, transforming anxiety into structured celebration, fear into predictable custom, and the unknown into comforting pattern. This duality is reflected in the prevalence of myths and stories that mingle light and darkness, such as Santa Claus, Krampus, and other figures who blend benevolence with threat, reinforcing moral and social codes, encouraging obedience, and managing communal expectations, all while disguising these mechanisms in narratives of joy, kindness, and generosity. Moreover, Christmas acts as a psychological bridge between past and present, linking modern individuals to centuries of cultural heritage. Yet in doing so, it also subtly reinforces conformity, habit, and unexamined belief, as rituals and symbols are repeated without questioning, embedding ancient fears, moral codes, and social norms into contemporary life, often unconsciously. On a societal level, the holiday stimulates both cooperation and competition. Markets, commerce, and media leverage the emotional resonance of Christmas, amplifying desires, insecurities, and social comparison, while simultaneously creating shared experiences, traditions, and narratives that unify groups, reflecting the dual role of the holiday as both a tool of cultural cohesion and a mirror of human vulnerability, manipulation, and ambition. The psychological implications extend further. Children internalize norms, behaviors, and values through the repetition of Christmas rituals, learning lessons about generosity, reward, punishment, and the intersection of morality and materiality, often without realizing that these lessons are steeped in centuries-old attempts to regulate human behavior, ensure social order, and channel survival instincts. Even adults are not immune. The anticipation, preparation, and performance of holiday customs trigger deep-seated emotions, stress responses, and pleasure circuits, illustrating that Christmas is not merely a passive cultural event, but an active psychological experience, one capable of shaping mood, perception, and interpersonal dynamics in profound ways. And yet, amidst this orchestration of human emotion and cultural continuity, there is an underlying tension, a shadow that has survived despite commercialization, secularization, and modernization, the lingering reminder of mortality, uncertainty, and the unseen forces once appeased through ritual, a quiet hum beneath every ornament, every candle, every gift, that tells us humans have always used ceremony, tradition, and symbolic action to negotiate with fear, hope, and the uncontrollable elements of life. Understanding the psychological and cultural impact of Christmas allows us to see it not merely as a holiday, but as a mirror reflecting the deepest instincts, fears, and desires of humanity, a ritualized negotiation with the unknown, and a complex interplay of joy, anxiety, social expectation, and ancient memory that continues to shape lives across centuries and continents. And as we explore these layers further, the comforting image of Christmas begins to reveal its complexity, showing that beneath every festive light, every carefully arranged feast, and every cheerful song, there lies a profound human story of adaptation, survival, and emotional resonance. A reminder that the holiday is as much about the human mind as it is about celebration, and that the shadows it casts, though often unnoticed, are inseparable from the light, leaving us to wonder whether the joy we experience is ever truly separate from the fear, hope, and ritualized instincts of those who came before us, whose presence, like the flicker of a candle in the dark, still lingers in our traditions, shaping our hearts, our minds, and the way we celebrate the season every single year. As the season of Christmas reaches its peak, with homes ablaze with lights, streets filled with music, and hearts full of expectation, it is easy to believe that the holiday exists solely for joy, generosity, and the warmth of togetherness. Yet, if we look deeper, we begin to understand that all of these celebrations are part of a far more profound, almost invisible tapestry, a psychological and cultural architecture built over millennia to help humanity confront the darkness, both external and internal, that comes with the long winter nights, the impermanence of life, and the inevitability of loss. The presents under the tree, the songs sung in chorus, the feasts shared with family, and even the flicker of a single candle are all echoes of ancient rituals designed to soothe anxiety, to structure time, and to allow human beings to feel a measure of control over a world that is, at its core, unpredictable and often terrifying. In this light, the holiday is not merely about outward displays of generosity or the sweetness of tradition, but about confronting the duality of existence, joy and fear, life and death, hope and despair, through carefully constructed symbols that reassure, comfort, and subtly instruct the mind to navigate uncertainty with ritualized behavior. When we give gifts, we are participating in an ancient negotiation with fate, whether consciously or not, expressing a desire to influence outcomes, strengthen bonds, and secure a semblance of harmony in an inherently chaotic environment. When we sing familiar songs, we are recalling patterns from centuries past, invoking communal memory, and tying ourselves emotionally to generations who once sang to ward off spirits, ensure survival, and claim connection in the face of impermanence. The lights that adorn homes and trees are more than decoration. They are modern interpretations of ancient fire rituals, a physical representation of hope against darkness, a metaphor for life itself, enduring through the cold and the shadow, a subtle psychological anchor for the human mind that instinctively seeks comfort and illumination. Even the stress, exhaustion, and conflict that often accompany the holiday are not accidental. They are echoes of historical pressures, social expectations, and ritualized challenges that tested communities' cohesion, morality, and resilience, ensuring that human beings remained vigilant, adaptable, and engaged with both the joys and the hardships of life. And yet, despite the psychological complexity, there is beauty in this tradition, a delicate weaving of light and shadow, pleasure and tension, memory and anticipation that allows people to experience a profound emotional resonance few other cultural phenomena can achieve. The philosophical lesson hidden in the holiday is that human beings have always needed ritual to survive, not merely physically, but emotionally and psychologically, as a means of structuring meaning, confronting mortality, and negotiating the delicate balance between joy and fear. Christmas, in this sense, is a mirror reflecting humanity itself, a complex interplay of hope and dread, generosity and obligation, order and chaos, all distilled into a single season that continues to captivate, comfort, and challenge the mind. The narrative of the holiday reframes our understanding of everyday rituals, revealing that what we often perceive as simple pleasure or tradition is actually an intricate dance with history, psychology, and culture, a legacy of countless generations striving to make sense of the world, to find connection, and to claim light amid darkness. And when we embrace this deeper awareness, we begin to see our celebrations differently, not as mere repetition of customs, but as participation in a living story, one that bridges the past and present, the conscious and unconscious, the mundane and the profound. The snowflakes falling silently outside, the flicker of candles, the rustle of wrapping paper, the sound of laughter or tears, they are all parts of a ritual that has survived because it meets a fundamental human need to reconcile joy with fear, life with death, certainty with uncertainty. Perhaps the true meaning of Christmas is not to be found in the superficial trappings of gifts, trees, and lights, but in the emotional and philosophical resonance these trappings evoke, in the silent understanding that we are part of something much larger than ourselves, a tradition that has guided countless ancestors through the long nights and continues to shape how we relate to the world, to each other, and to the shadowed corners of our own minds. This understanding reframes everything. The bright decorations are no longer mere ornaments, but symbols of resilience. The songs are no longer simple melodies, but vessels of memory, culture, and emotional connection. The rituals we perform, often unconsciously, are not idle habits, but complex acts of survival, hope, and reflection, connecting us to centuries of human experience and wisdom. And as the night deepens, the final lesson becomes clear. Christmas, in all its light and shadow, is not just a holiday, it is a mirror of the human condition, a reflection of our deepest fears and highest hopes, our ability to create meaning out of uncertainty, and our enduring need to celebrate life, even when confronted with the inevitability of loss and the unknown. In this perspective, every tree, every gift, every song, and every light becomes part of a continuum, a living testament to human ingenuity, emotion, and resilience. And we realize that the celebration we thought was simple is actually profound, complex, and deeply moving, connecting us not just to each other, but to the long lineage of humanity that came before, who faced darkness and cold, uncertainty and fear, yet through ritual, song, and light, created a space for hope, meaning, and the enduring celebration of life itself. And as the final echoes of carols fade, as the last flicker of candlelight diminishes, we are left with a quiet understanding that the holiday is both deeply human and timeless, a living story in which each of us participates, knowingly or not, and a reminder that the darkness is never complete, that light endures, that tradition survives, and that the human heart, in its longing, fear, and hope, continues to write the story of Christmas anew every year, leaving us to wonder, reflect, and perhaps see our world, our rituals, and ourselves in a profoundly different light than we ever have before.